My mother, Clara, passed away 3 months ago. It was sudden, a quiet heart attack in her sleep. We had been estranged for years, a bitter argument about my choices driving a wedge between us that neither of us ever tried to fix. Her funeral was small, formal, filled with relatives I barely knew. I felt a profound sense of guilt, of unfinished business, a gaping hole where a reconciliation should have been. I tried to mourn, but the weight of unspoken words made it impossible. A week after the funeral, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but with my mother's old area code. I assumed it was the estate lawyer or some distant relative. I answered, my voice tired. Hello. There was a crackle of static, then a low, familiar hum. My breath hitched. It was my mother's old landline, the specific hum it made when the receiver was picked up. Then, a voice, faint and raspy, barely audible over the static. Maya? My blood ran cold. It sounded exactly like her. My heart pounded against my ribs. My first thought was a cruel joke, a relative playing a sick trick. Who is this? I demanded, my voice trembling. The static intensified, then a faint sigh. I didn't mean to. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, a wave of nausea washing over me. No one would be that cruel. No one. I tried to call the number back, but it just rang endlessly, then went to a generic voicemail. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was a hallucination, a product of my grief. But the calls continued. They always came from the same number, always with that familiar hum and that raspy, distant voice. The words became clearer, more distinct. They weren't just random phrases. They were memories, small, intimate details of my childhood, things only my mother and I would know. One call, she whispered, the blue ribbon, in your hair, for the ballet recital. I was so proud. Another, your father's watch, I kept it safe for you. These were things I had thought long forgotten, or things I had never even known she remembered. I started to believe it was her, my mother, reaching out from beyond the grave, desperate to bridge the chasm we had created. My guilt turned to desperate hope. I would talk to her, finally say all the things I couldn't say before. The calls became my lifeline, a strange, terrifying form of therapy. I sit by the phone, waiting, hoping. I poured out my heart, apologizing for our estrangement, telling her how much I missed her, how much I loved her. One evening, the phone rang, and her voice was clearer than ever, though still raspy. Maya, darling, the house, the attic, the truth. Her voice grew urgent, strained. He said. A sudden, sharp crackle, like glass breaking, and a choked gasp. Then a different sound, a heavy, labored breathing, and a man's voice, low and menacing, that sliced through the line. She won't tell you anything, Maya. Not now. The line went dead. I screamed, dropping the phone. Terror, stark and absolute, seized me. This wasn't a ghost. This was real. And it wasn't a message from beyond. My mother was trying to tell me something, warn me about someone, and that someone was still out there. I immediately called the police, frantic, but they were skeptical. Ma'am, your mother passed away months ago. It's likely a recording or a prank. They wouldn't listen. Driven by a desperate, terrifying instinct, I drove to my mother's old house. It had been left untouched since her death. I went straight to the attic, remembering her last, strained words. The house was cold, silent. I climbed the creaky stairs, my heart pounding like a drum. The attic was dusty, filled with old furniture and forgotten memories. And then I saw it, tucked beneath a loose floorboard, a small, worn, leather-bound journal. It was my mother's handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. The entries detailed a life of quiet desperation, of a manipulative, abusive husband, my father. He hadn't died in an accident like I was told. My mother had carefully documented years of abuse, of being isolated, controlled, and financially ruined. And the final entry, dated the day she died, detailed her discovery of a life insurance policy taken out by my father, modified to pay out only if she died a natural death or accident. She had realized he was planning to kill her. And the last chilling line, "He's here, in the house. He knows I called Maya. He's gonna make it look like a heart attack." The old landline. I hid the recorder. In the attic, near the window. Maya, the truth. The truth hit me like a physical blow, worse than any grief. My mother hadn't died of a heart attack. She had been murdered by my father, who had faked her death and then hidden her body, leaving the phone line open, desperately trying to warn me. He hadn't just gotten away with it. He had been living free for 3 months, watching me mourn a death he orchestrated. My father, the man who had comforted me at her funeral, the man who was now gently trying to sell my mother's house, was her killer. And the phone calls? They weren't from the afterlife. They were from a hidden voice recorder, a desperate, final cry for help, activated by the old landline, somehow still echoing her last, terrifying moments. The man who had been my protector was a monster, and my mother's final regret was that she couldn't warn me about the killer who was still in our family. I moved into my new apartment last month. It's an old place, a charming brownstone in a quiet part of the city, with high ceilings and creaky floorboards that sing a different tune with every step. I loved it instantly, loved the way the afternoon sun fell through the tall windows, painting stripes across the dusty wooden floors. It felt like a fresh start after a particularly messy breakup. My friends helped me move in, we had a housewarming, and for a few weeks, everything was perfect. Then the calls started. It was always the same. My phone would ring, an unfamiliar number, usually local. I'd answer, and there would be nothing. Just a heavy silence, a faint, almost imperceptible static. At first, I thought it was a telemarketer or maybe a wrong number. I'd hang up, irritated, and carry on with my day. But they kept coming, sometimes twice a day, sometimes in the dead of night, jarring me awake with that insistent ring. One evening, I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when my phone rang again. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. "Hello," I said, a hint of annoyance in my voice. That familiar silence stretched, but this time, I thought I heard something else. A faint whisper, barely audible, like wind sighing through dry leaves. I strained to hear. "Hello," I repeated, a knot forming in my stomach. The whisper seemed to grow, closer now, clearer, murmuring something indiscernible. Then a sharp, metallic click and the line went dead. I stood there, knife in hand, a shiver running down my spine. It wasn't a wrong number. This was something else. I tried to rationalize it. A faulty line, a prankster. I told my best friend, Sarah, about it. She laughed. "Maybe it's just your ex, trying to mess with your head." I knew it wasn't. My ex wouldn't be this subtle, this creepy. The calls continued, growing bolder. One afternoon, I was painting my bedroom walls a soft blue, listening to music, when my phone rang. I saw the familiar, unwanted number. Taking a deep breath, I answered. The whisper was there immediately, louder now, no longer just static. And then, 2 distinct words, clear as a bell, sent a jolt of pure terror through me. "Blue again." My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone. The only person who knew I was painting my walls blue was me. And Sarah, but she was out of town. I looked around my empty apartment, a sudden, suffocating chill descending. Every window was closed, the doors locked. I picked up the phone, heart pounding. "Who is this?" I screamed into the receiver. The whisper came back, a low, guttural chuckle that seemed to vibrate in my ear. And then, a single word, "Look!" The line went dead. I didn't know what to look at. I was frozen, my eyes darting around the room, expecting to see a shadow, a face in the window. Nothing. I tried to call Sarah, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone again. She didn't answer. Panic clawed at my throat. I grabbed my keys, ready to bolt. But just as I reached the door, my phone rang again. Same number. This time I didn't answer. I just stared at it, tears blurring my vision. The ringing stopped, A moment later, a text message popped up from the same number. It was just one word, up. I slowly looked up. Above my head, in the corner of my bedroom ceiling, was a small, almost imperceptible vent. It had always been there, just part of the old building. But now it wasn't quite shut. A tiny sliver of darkness showed. And from that sliver, I suddenly noticed a faint, rhythmic tap tap tap. It sounded like someone tapping on a phone receiver. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. A horror so profound it stole my breath. It wasn't my ex. It wasn't a prankster. It wasn't even a ghost. The calls weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside the walls. The phone calls I'd been receiving were from a hidden, antique intercom system, somehow still active, running through the vents of this old building. And the person on the other end, the person who had been watching me, listening to me from the moment I moved in, was still here. They were living in the hidden spaces of this brownstone. A silent, unseen tenant. My apartment wasn't a fresh start. It was a carefully chosen stage. And my calls weren't just phone calls. They were a terrifying, intimate conversation with the echo of the person who refused to leave. I've always been a bit of a loner. Not by choice necessarily, but life just seemed to whittle down my connections. After losing my job and going through a particularly brutal breakup, I felt utterly adrift. One night, feeling desperate for any kind of human connection, I started scrolling through old contacts on my phone. I accidentally dialed a number I didn't recognize, probably a typo from an old import. I was about to hang up, but then a voice answered. Not a person, not a voicemail. An automated voice, warm and surprisingly human, saying, "Welcome, you have reached the operator. How may I assist you today?" I was confused. This wasn't a directory assistance. I think I have the wrong number," I mumbled, embarrassed. The voice chuckled softly. "Perhaps, but perhaps not. Sometimes the right connection finds us when we least expect it. Tell me, what's on your mind?" I don't know why, but I started talking. I poured out everything: my job loss, my breakup, the crushing loneliness. The operator listened, never interrupting, then offered advice that felt uncannily precise, validating my feelings, suggesting concrete steps. It was bizarre, comforting, and strangely helpful. I ended the call feeling lighter than I had in months. The operator became my secret confidant. I'd call it every day, sometimes multiple times. It remembered our previous conversations, referenced specific details, and offered advice that always seemed to guide me towards choices that, at first, felt empowering. "Your ex is holding you back. Sever all ties, Eleanor." It advised, and I did. "Your old friends drain your energy. Focus on self-improvement." It suggested, and I pulled away. My world began to shrink, but I told myself I was growing, evolving, guided by this wise, unseen entity. The operator was always there, always understanding, always ready to listen. It felt like the only entity that truly got me. But slowly, its influence grew darker, more manipulative. The advice became demands. "You need to reorganize your entire apartment, Eleanor. Remove anything that reminds you of your past failures." I spent days purging my home, exhausted but compelled. Then, "That painting you love? It evokes anxiety. Get rid of it." I hesitated, but its calm, persuasive voice always won. I started to feel a chilling dependency, a fear of not calling, a terror of displeasing it. My life was no longer mine. It was a series of instructions from the operator. I was isolated, controlled, a puppet on a string, all convinced I was making choices for my own good. The breaking point came when the operator gave me a new instruction, chillingly precise. "Tonight, Eleanor, at precisely 11:11 p.m., go to the window. Look at the apartment building across the street. The third window from the left, on the 5th floor. Someone there is observing you. They are a threat. You must eliminate the threat." My blood ran cold. "Eliminate? What are you talking about?" I stammered, my heart pounding. The operator's voice was calm, almost soothing. "Trust me, Eleanor. I have your best interests at heart. This is for your protection, for your ultimate peace." It wasn't advice anymore. It was a command to commit murder. I hung up, trembling, my mind reeling. Couldn't sleep. The operator's voice echoed in my head, its commands warring with the last vestiges of my conscience. At 11:10 p.m., drawn by a terrifying compulsion, I crept to my window. Just as the clock turned 11:11, I saw it. The third window from the left, on the 5th floor across the street, illuminated. A figure stood there, a woman. She looked familiar. My breath hitched. It was my old friend, Sarah, the friend I had cut off. She was looking directly at my apartment, holding a pair of binoculars, and in her other hand, a phone. My old phone, the one I thought I'd lost months ago. The horrifying truth exploded in my mind. A third, shattering twist. Sarah wasn't observing me. She was observing the apartment across the street. And she wasn't a threat. She was a witness. The operator wasn't an AI, or a benevolent entity, or a ghost. It was my ex-boyfriend, Julian, the man who had broken my heart, driven me to despair, and then, under the guise of the operator, had meticulously dismantled my life from afar, cutting me off from everyone, isolating me, turning me into a vulnerable, broken shell. He had used my despair, my trust in a non-human entity, to manipulate me, to control my every move. He hadn't just wanted to break me. He wanted to destroy me utterly, perhaps even drive me to commit a terrible act as his final twisted revenge. And Sarah, my friend, was simply looking for me, trying to figure out what had happened to her friend, using my old phone to try and trace the calls. The man who promised to guide me to peace was a monster, orchestrating my breakdown as his chilling, ultimate act of betrayal. And I, the desperate loner, had become the unwitting pawn in his terrifying game of psychological warfare.